is with us today. And Algeria going to the polls. Voters there not feeling too enthusiastic about it, though, are they?
Apparently not. Algeria, the nation left behind by the Arab Spring, is what The Guardian calls it. They say that while Tunisia next door is transitioning to democracy, Morocco on the other side still has a monarchy, but they've instituted a lot of reforms in recent months and now have a parliament with more powers than it did a year ago, with an Islamist party in power. But in Algeria, you've still got the same president who's been in power for 13 years and a parliament which, according to The Guardian, is little more than symbolic. Most of the MPs don't even turn up to work, apparently, because they know that their roles are not terribly important, and turnout is expected to be incredibly low because voters widely fear there'll be fraud in that election. When Bouteflika, the president there, was last re-elected for the third time in 2008, there was what the paper calls a tsunami of fraud on an industrial scale. So why aren't Algerians rising up against this and deciding to follow the example next door in Tunisia? Well, partly they say it's because they're afraid they've still traumatised by the scars of the civil war that killed 150,000 people in Algeria in the 1990s, so they're quite worried about anything that might cause spiralling violence. They've got the same social problems, though, that Tunisia and Morocco and other countries have. 21% of unemployment among young people, for example. So it's not like they've not got problems to deal with there, but they feel they're completely disconnected, really, from the political process because going out to vote has so little impact in Algeria. The media there is quite censored, but there's still some interesting articles in the papers there. Al Watan newspaper, you see there, they say these elections only serve to legitimise a near dictatorship and accuses the ruling party of blackmailing and bribing people to get them to go to the polls. What about the role of Islamists? That's also something they're talking about in Le Quotidien d'Oran. Well, they say there's 7 different Islamist parties in Algeria who can't quite agree with one another, but they're all quite moderate. They're all trying to follow the Turkish example of Muslim democracy, and they may well come top of the polls there. That doesn't necessarily mean they'll be able to form a government that really changes anything. In that article, they mock the current government in Algeria for trying to appeal to Algerians' patriotism and saying that they should back the current party, which has been in power since independence, because they're the heroes of the country now. They say, come on, in that article, that was 70 years ago, and you've done nothing for Algerians in the meantime.
Going to go to the US now. Gay marriage there has come a step closer. President Obama publicly declaring his support.
Yes, The Atlantic calls it a leap of faith. Now, it might not seem hugely controversial to some of us in Europe to say that, but in America, it's still quite a thorny issue. Now, according to The Atlantic, Obama's probably always believed this personally, but now he's decided to go public with it. They say it might be perhaps because he's recognising how the support base of the Democratic Party has changed. The white working class vote that was once core to the Democrat Party is quite socially conservative. They don't necessarily back this sort of move, but he obviously is trying to pitch himself more to young people, to the upwardly mobile white middle classes, who they reckon will probably be the core of Democratic support at the next election. So in some ways, by announcing this, he's allowing a lot of possibly floating voters in white working classes in the South, in the American heartland, go towards the Republicans because they're not keen on that kind of socially liberal policy, while he's trying to shore up those voters who do back it. Now, in Slate, they're saying, well, if you're gay and you want to get married, does his change of opinion actually make any difference? Well, technically speaking, not, because he's got to ask Congress to change the law, and the law, the US Defence of Marriage Act, still defines marriage as between a man and a woman. But they point out that federal lawyers aren't actually defending this. If individual states decide to recognise gay marriage, as 13 now have, Washington is just allowing them to do it.
And Greece, we're going to go to now. The Olympic flame is going to be lit today, isn't it? But last Olympics, of course, held there in 2004. They're still dragging down the country's finances, aren't they?
Yes, The Guardian has been to the old Olympic Park in Athens from 2004, where all the paint is peeling and the clocks are stopped. And they say when reporting on Greece's debt crisis, we might have badly underestimated how much that Olympics helped to dig the country into further debt. The official cost was €6 billion. They talked to an MP who was sitting at the time who reckons it cost $27 billion as a result of what they call creative accounting. It's not very good news for London, which has already gone drastically over budget. They say that the poor Greeks who invented the Olympics now have had to cut the amount of athletes in half that they were going to send to London because they can't afford it.
Elena, thanks very much. There's Elena Casas with her look at the international papers here on France 24. Just to remind you then of that main news story which has been coming into us over the last hour or so.